David West, a billionaire who has long held the belief that money can resolve any issue, suddenly faces a challenge beyond the reach of wealth when his son falls into an unexplained coma. Just when despair begins to settle in, a homeless girl named Lily enters their lives and works a miraculous transformation. Her unwavering faith alters the course of events, guiding David on an unforgettable journey of personal change. Don't miss this compelling tale. Subscribe to the channel, and let's embark on this journey today. David West was a man who thought money could solve every problem. With power, wealth, and influence, he seemed to have it all. He had constructed his empire from scratch, clawing his way to the pinnacle through various deals and sheer determination. The towering building that carried his name stood as a testament to his achievements, while the lively streets of New York appeared to bow to his accomplishments. Yet, none of it mattered anymore as he sat beside the sterile hospital bed, where the only sound permeating the room was the rhythmic beeping of the machines. His 12-year-old son, Noah, lay unconscious, entrapped in a coma. The doctors had exhausted every option, the best specialists, the latest treatments, and even experimental procedures. David had spared no expense in his desperate quest for a miracle. But so far, that miracle had not arrived. Noah's accident had been abrupt and shrouded in mystery. One fateful morning, David received the shocking call. Noah was discovered unconscious at the bottom of an emergency stairwell at his school. There were no witnesses and no evident explanation. Like an invisible force, the universe had pulled the ground out from beneath David's feet. For months, he watched his son drift further away, each passing day depleting his hope. Dr. Emily Harris, the neurologist in charge of Noah's case, had just delivered the most devastating news David could receive. With her expression fraught with concern and the soft cadence of her voice revealing the weight of her words, she conveyed, "David, I'm afraid the latest scans show a significant decline in brain activity. We may need to begin discussing palliative care." The words struck him hard. Akin to a punch to the gut, it felt as if someone had flipped his entire world upside down. The pain inflicted by her words was more overwhelming than any loss he had ever endured, and he felt as though the walls were closing in around him. "Are you telling me to give up?" David's voice quivered with raw emotion, his grip on Noah's limp hand tightening in defiance. "I'm advising you to prepare," Dr. Harris gently replied, her tone heavy with sympathy, but her statement carried a finality David could not reconcile. He refused to accept that his son, his precious Noah, might be lost forever. How could he? He had prevailed over every obstacle in his life, from business adversaries to financial crises, fueled by sheer determination. However, sitting in that frigid, sterile hospital room surrounded by humming machines, he felt utterly powerless. No amount of money could change this. No influence could reshape his son's destiny. In the nights that ensued, David remained by Noah's side, whispering apologies, regrets, and words of love. He held Noah's hand tightly, wishing fervently for him to awaken. "I'm sorry, son," he murmured, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have been there for you more. If only I had spent less time chasing deals and attending meetings. I should have been a better father." But it all felt futile. The silence in the room was deafening, and his son lay motionless as if the universe had eternally shut its door to them. One evening, while David sat in the dimly lit hospital room, a knock at the door startled him. He hadn't expected anyone, assuming it was another nurse checking on Noah or perhaps an orderly delivering a report. However, when he turned to look, it wasn't a nurse at the door but a young girl, no older than 15 or 16. Her clothes were worn and tattered, her hair a tangled mess, and she was barefoot despite the chill in the air. Dirt smudged her face, while her eyes, filled with fierce determination, stared directly into his soul. For a moment, David stood speechless, uncertain about what to make of her presence. She didn't belong here, in a hospital, within this realm of sterile walls and polished floors. "I know how to save your son," the girl declared, her voice steady despite her appearance, a firm statement, not a question. There was an unwavering certainty in her tone, prompting David to pause. Before he could respond, nurses rushed into the room, their voices raised in confusion as they attempted to remove the girl. Yet, despite his disbelief, David raised his hand, halting them. He wasn't sure why he did so, but something about the girl's presence called for hesitation. She was more than just a street kid. There was a profound depth within her. "My name is Lily," she introduced herself, her voice calm despite suggesting a life filled with trials. "Please, you have to let me help him." David felt torn. Was this a cruel joke? A scam? The desperation in his heart cried out for anything, any shred of hope. Yet, his rational mind urged caution, telling him to be sensible. He had built his empire on logic and numbers. Yet here he was, facing a homeless girl who claimed she could save his son. "Help him," David whispered, barely able to believe what he was saying. Lily took a step forward, reaching for Noah's hand without seeking permission. The nurses observed in silence, uncertain whether to intervene, their eyes filled with hesitation. David made no move to stop her, even though instinct warned him to push her away. There was something compelling about her presence, something in her demeanor that made him want to believe her. She closed her eyes for a moment and then spoke softly. "Faith," her voice unwavering, as if she were addressing something beyond this realm. To David's astonishment, she then began to pray. Initially, her words were faint, so soft he could barely hear them, but as she continued, her voice gained strength, imbuing the air with intensity that sent a chill up his spine. "Lord," she whispered, "I come before you with faith, seeking your mercy. This boy isn't ready to depart. Please bring him back. Let your light shine through him. Let him awaken. Let his father witness that miracles are real." As she prayed, David felt a shift in the air around them. At first, it was subtle, just a sensation, but enough to stand the hairs on the back of his neck on end. The machines, which previously emitted a constant lifeless beep, began to develop a different rhythm. David's heart raced. Was it possible? Then, to his astonishment, he saw it. Noah's fingers twitched. The soft beep of the machines altered. It was small and imperceptible at first, but undeniably present. The room held its breath, and for the first time in months, David allowed hope to seep in. Tears filled his eyes as he glanced at Lily. "What did you do?" he whispered, scarcely able to speak. Lily met his gaze, her expression calm and almost knowing. "I prayed," she replied simply, "and God listened." David could hardly grasp what had just unfolded. For months, he had watched Noah's condition worsen, helpless to change anything. But now, against all odds, the boy's fingers twitched, and the monitors that had been so steady now pulsed with a renewed rhythm. For the first time, there was hope, fragile but undeniably present. The nurses in the room were equally astonished. One rushed to check the monitors, her face pale with disbelief. "Oh my God!" she gasped, her voice trembling. "He's responding." Another nurse hastily reached for the phone to summon the doctors. David stepped forward, heart racing. He grasped Noah's other hand, terrified to believe it was real. "Noah," he called, voice thick with emotion. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was silence, just the steady beep of the machines. Then something extraordinary happened. A single tear escaped from the corner of Noah's closed eye. The sight took David's breath away. His son, his precious boy, was alive. He was awake, at least in some small way. David turned to Lily, who remained by the bed, her small hand resting on Noah. Her expression was calm, yet her eyes held a quiet strength. She had accomplished what no doctor, no treatment, and no sum of money could achieve. She had breathed life back into his son. "What did you do?" David repeated, his voice trembling. He couldn't understand it, He didn't want to understand it. All he knew was that his son was alive because of this girl, a homeless child who had entered his life with only faith and hope. Lily met his gaze without hesitation. "I prayed," she repeated simply, "and God listened." The sincerity in her words was so profound it left David speechless. There was no grand gesture, no complex explanation. She had merely believed, and that belief had affected something greater than him. It was both humbling and awe-inspiring. Before David could respond, the door swung open, and a team of doctors rushed in with urgency. They quickly surrounded Noah, checking his vitals and adjusting the machines. Yet, David barely registered their presence. His focus remained fixed on Lily. She had saved his son, and now she was seeking something else. Lily looked at David, her expression serious. "Now you need to help me," she said quietly. David blinked, momentarily confused. Help her? She had just accomplished a miracle. She had rescued his son from the brink of death, and now she needed assistance. Before he could say anything, she continued, "My little brother, Luke." Lily's voice trembled slightly. "He's sick. He's very sick, and if we don't get him help, he's going to die." David's heart sank at the urgency in her voice, the same determination that had filled her while praying for Noah now directed at her brother. David could not overlook the gravity of her words. This was a child, her brother, in need of help just as his own son had been moments prior. He swallowed hard, asking, "Where is he?" his voice thick with emotion. Lily hesitated before responding. "He's on the streets," she said softly, "in an old church that's abandoned now. We sleep there under the front arch, but it's not warm enough, and he's getting worse." David's mind raced. He had occupied a world seemingly detached from the struggles faced by children like Lily and Luke. He had spent his life in luxurious offices, surrounded by the finest things money could buy. No. Here was this girl standing before him, pleading for help for her little brother, a child sleeping on cold concrete while his own son lay in a hospital bed, barely brought back from the edge of death. Lily's words hit David harder than anticipated. She hadn't asked for money, nor had she requested anything aside from assistance for her sibling. Yet she had already performed something profoundly powerful. It challenged every notion David had regarding the world, power, and wealth. He exhaled slowly, feeling a knot form in his chest. "Where is he?" he asked again, his urgency growing. Lily's face illuminated with a flicker of hope as she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice brimming with gratitude. "I'll take you to him." David's heart raced as he followed Lily through the dimly lit streets of New York. The weight of his decision felt heavy on his shoulders. However, watching Lily's determined stride, his doubts began to dissipate. There was an unexpected strength in her, a resilience that seemed to propel her through life's adversities. She had just worked a miracle, saving his son when hope appeared lost, and now she led him to help her brother. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being their soft footsteps and the distant city hum. David, who had spent his life in a wealthy and influential world, couldn't help but notice the striking contrast between his usual surroundings and the life Lily navigated. Surrounded by luxury and driven by power, he now felt immense shame at his disconnection from the genuine struggles around him. After a few blocks, they turned down a narrow alley, and a chill ran down David's spine. This wasn't an area of the city he ever frequented. It was where people like him didn't tread while those less fortunate fought to survive on the streets, and yet, here he was, walking in the path of a girl who had grown up here. Eventually, they arrived at their destination, a crumbling church, appearing to have been abandoned for years. The building was in disrepair, windows shattered and its once grand stone walls adorned with graffiti. The front arch, where Lily had indicated they slept, was now merely a shadow of what was once a protective shelter against the cold night air. David felt a pang in his heart as he surveyed the scene before him. This was where Lily and her brother had lived, in a world where he had always possessed more than enough. Shifting his gaze to Lily, He noted the softened hope in her expression. "There," she said, a blend of exhaustion and determination coloring her tone. David followed her into the church, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. There, lying on a thin blanket on the cold, hard floor, was a small, frail boy. His skin appeared pale, his breathing shallow, and despite the layers of tattered clothing enveloping him, he shivered. A lump formed in David's throat as he recognized Lily's little brother, Luke. At just 8 years old, he looked far smaller than his age. His fever-pinched face carried the unmistakable signs of malnutrition, too thin and too weak. The sheer fact that he had been left to suffer in these conditions, devoid of proper care, hit David like a punch to the gut. Lily knelt by her brother, brushing the matted blonde hair from his forehead. "Luke," she whispered softly, "I found someone to help you." Luke's fevered eyes flickered open, a faint smile gracing his cracked lips. "You came back," he murmured hoarsely, his voice nearly inaudible. Lily smiled back, her eyes filled with tenderness. "I always come back," she assured him gently. "You're going to be okay." David knelt beside them, hands trembling slightly as he reached out to touch Luke's forehead. The boy burned with fever, his frail form making David acutely aware of his weight in his arms. His heart ached as he recognized that this boy, who should have been nestled in a warm bed with loving parents, had instead been left to suffer in the cold. "We need to get him to a hospital," David said urgently, instincts kicking in as he realized every second counted. Lily's eyes widened in hope. "You mean it?" she asked, voice trembling with disbelief and relief. David nodded. "Yes," he affirmed. "We're getting him help." He quickly lifted Luke into his arms. The boy felt so light it deepened David's sense of guilt. How had he allowed this to happen? A man capable of affording anything had never once considered the plight of children suffering right under his nose. As David carried Luke through the streets, the weight of his choices pressed on him. He had dedicated his life to accumulating wealth, power, and success. But in that moment, he realized none of it had prepared him for this. He had been blind to the struggles surrounding him, and now, for the first time, he was truly witnessing the consequences of his actions. When they reached the hospital, David vowed that no one would turn them away. This time, he was not merely a wealthy man. He was a father who had nearly watched his son slip away, and he would do whatever it took to save this boy. Entering the hospital with Luke in his arms, he was no longer just billionaire David West. He was a man who had learned a profound lesson about empathy, humility, and the true significance of life. Saving Luke meant everything, and he recognized that sometimes the most powerful act is reaching out to help those in need, a lesson David West would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the days unfolded, Luke began to recover in the hospital, enveloped by warmth and care he had never before known. David remained by his side, feeling a bond grow not only with the boy but with the entire experience. The guilt he once held, the weight of his past decisions, began to dissipate. He had accomplished something significant, something genuine. He had helped save a life. In doing so, his own life had transformed. The path ahead was not without challenges, but David discovered a purpose beyond wealth and success. He adopted both Lily and Luke, granting them the family and love they so desperately needed. He established a foundation to aid homeless children by providing shelter, education, and health care, dedicating his wealth to ensure that no child would suffer as Lily and Luke once had. One evening, while David stood beside Lily, watching the city lights sparkle below, she looked up at him with a smile. "You really did it," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "You're helping kids like us." David gazed down at her, heart swelling. "No, Lily," he replied. "You did it. You saved my son. You changed my life." As they stood together, David fully understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't merely about money, power, or success. It was about the lives we impact and the love we share. At that moment, David West realized he had discovered something far more precious than anything he had ever earned. If this story touched you, inspiring belief in second chances, kindness, and doing what is right, please don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to follow more heartwarming stories, reminding us that sometimes the smallest act of faith can change everything.